Hey everybody, Professor Leis here. In this video, I'm going to explain the object-text connection activity that we will complete for either this section of Habits of the Creative Mind, page 1 through 7, or pages 21 through 27. So you're not going to do it for both. You're going to just do it for one of these readings. You're going to read both of the readings, of course, but you're only going to choose the one that resonates more with you, which you'd like to complete the activity for. So just a little bit of context here. What this activity is challenging us to do is to forge connections, meaningful connections to the things that we read so that we can better understand them. So by completing this activity, hopefully you're going to learn that whatever we read, whatever we encounter, we have the ability to forge important connections to help us understand those things better, right? So whatever we read, this is possible for us to do. Now, one of the markers of critical thinking is to be able to forge connections among different things, especially if they seem like they don't readily connect to one another. So that's one of the markers of critical thinking, being able to make these important connections. So let me go ahead and read this, and then I'll explain and show you all an example of how to complete this. So the first few steps are behind the scenes steps, okay? So this is stuff that I'm not going to see. This is stuff that you're just going to do on your own for your own self to make sure that what you do post, the stuff that I will see, the stuff that we will all see, is actually going to be meaningful and well constructed. So all this stuff is behind the scenes, okay? But it's still really important, all right? So step one is to carefully read and annotate, both orienting on finding your feet, pages 1 through 7, and beginning on unlearning, pages 21 through 27. So you're going to read both of those sections from Habits of the Creative Mind. Now, of course, as you're going through both of those sections, you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. You have your pen or pencil ready to go, your notebook open and available so that you can jot things down, write notes to yourself, pose questions, clarify things, define key terms or vocabulary, whatever the case is. We want to make sure that we're annotating as we're going. This is an investment in your future. It's going to help you in the future. So set yourself up for success. Make sure that you are annotating as you're going through. So when you are annotating, pay attention to statements or ideas that stand out to you as interesting, surprising, important, or confusing. So you would underline those statements, underline those sentences from the reading that strike you as important, strike you as surprising, strike you as interesting, or confusing, especially if it's confusing. We want to embrace confusion because that's the site of learning. If we embrace things that confuse us, we're more likely to learn from them because we're trying to understand it. So all of those things are important. Jot down connections to other texts, so other readings or things that you've encountered or ideas in the margins. Write down any questions you have about the ideas in these two readings. So all of that stuff is a part of reading actively, of annotating. So we want to do that for each of these. You're going to read both of these sections and annotate each of them. Step 2, review the texts and your annotations. So you're going to go back to your annotations, look at each of those readings, the things that stood out to you as interesting, surprising, important, confusing, and then you're going to select a passage from one of those readings, okay? So either this one or this one, okay? So you don't need to select passages from both, just one or the other, okay? So a passage doesn't mean that it's a whole paragraph, okay? So a passage just means a section of the reading. So a passage could be one sentence, it could be 2 sentences, 3 sentences, or it could be a whole paragraph, right? But whatever the case is, you're going to want to select one passage that stands out to you as interesting, important, confusing, powerful, surprising, and so on. Okay, so something that stands out to you is most important from either of these two readings. In your notes, so just in your notebook, this is meant to help you generate your ideas, explain why you selected this particular passage. So just jot it down. Why does this passage stand out to you? So this passage stands out to me because blah, 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 blah. So you're just going to write that to yourself in your notebook or in your Google Doc or whatever the case might be. This is behind the scenes stuff. You're brainstorming ideas. Step 3, find an object in your personal life that meaningfully connects to your selected passage. When choosing your object, follow these criteria. Okay, so you're gonna actually look in your room, look at in your house, your space. You're gonna actually find a physical object, okay, something that is in your life, in your space, that is meaningful to you, that connects to that particular passage that you selected from either of these two readings, okay? So make sure when you're trying to figure out the object that you want to connect the passage to, follow these criteria here. So make sure that the object is from your own life, not somebody else's life, okay? Make sure it's from your own life and has some kind of meaning for you, okay? So not just some random thing you found in the kitchen junk drawer, like a busted pen or a broken stapler or something. No, not just something random. It should be from your own life and it should have some sort of meaningful connection, okay? Or meaning in your life, all right? So in other words, it's not something random or simply an image you found online. So I don't want you to go Google images and just say, I need to find this, blah, 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 and then find that. No. It needs to be an object, something that you can pick up, touch, look at, hold in your own life that meaningfully connects to the passage that you selected. So make sure that the connection between your object and the passage is not superficial or obvious. So this superficial means that it's like kind of connects. It's like a surface level connection. It's like, okay, I guess so. Make sure that it does meaningfully connect, and make sure that the connection's not overly obvious, okay? So if somebody were to look at your object and look at the passage, they'd be like, oh, duh, that's how they connect. Try to think a little bit more abstractly, metaphorically, figuratively, and then so a little bit more clarification here. The connection, it shouldn't be a literal one-to-one connection. And what that means, so for example, do not select a coffee mug as your object if the passage mentions coffee. Or a pen, for example. Maybe you have your favorite pen and the passage mentions pen. It's like pen. That's a one-to-one connection. Coffee mug, that's a one-to-one connection. It's very obvious. It's very literal. So try to think a little bit more abstractly about your connection. Somebody else should not be able to easily identify the connection like immediately based on your object. If they were to see the object, they'd be like, oh, duh, that connects to that passage because it's an obvious connection. So try to think a little bit more abstractly about it, but make sure that it is a meaningful connection in some way. And then finally, the final criterion, make sure the object is appropriate in a school setting. So no guns or weapons or drug paraphernalia, for example, pornography, all that type of stuff. If you can't bring it into the classroom, don't select that as your object, okay? So use common sense there, use your better judgment. So again, all this stuff is behind the scenes. This is meant to help you better create what will be visible to us, okay? So this is what you are going to submit, what you will post, what we will see, okay? So what we are going to see, step 4, in writing, provide an interpretation or analysis of your selected passage and explain how and why your object connects to this specific passage in a meaningful way. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are introducing the quotation or the passage that stands out to us from the reading, and then we are providing some sort of explanation of the passage. So don't just say, I chose this passage and then here's the object. Explain what the passage means to you. What do you think it means? What's your interpretation? What's your analysis? What I think Miller and Jurassic mean by this is blah, 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 blah. Okay, so make sure that you explain what you think that passage means. And then you're going to explain how and why that your object connects to that passage. Be sure to include specific details and quotations from the reading in your written response. So this is a skill that we are working on in English 100. It's important that we incorporate specific details into our writing. We will be working on building quotations into our writing, so we're practicing that here. This is a method of practice, a space for practice. Because when we're writing our major essay projects, we're going to need to be, understand how to do that. And remember, the major essay projects are what count directly toward the final grade. And if we're not practicing to perform better on those things, then how can we expect those things to be good representations of our knowledge and our skills, right? So this is practice, but we need to practice incorporating specific details from the reading, practice building in quotations from the reading, practice explaining those quotations. And we also want to make sure that we are introducing our quotations with what we call signal phrases. A signal phrase, here's an example. Miller and Jurassic state. That's a perfectly great signal phrase. So feel free to use that signal phrase. So you say Miller and Jurassic state, and then you include the quotation. Right? So this phrase signals to your readers that there's a quotation coming right here. So whatever the quotation is that you decide to include, this signal phrase introduces it to your reader. It attaches it to your own writing. This is a skill that we're trying to learn in English 100. So make sure that we're practicing this in this particular activity. So you can use this signal phrase, or if you know how to use other kinds of signal phrases, that's fine. We'll be developing this as we go, but we want to start now, okay? So then the final step here, you're going to take a picture of your selected object and embed it with your submission. So remember, we need to embed our photos. Do not attach it as a separate file. Okay, so just like we did in the student introduction discussion post, when you all embedded the picture of yourself or of whatever represents you, you embedded it into your post. You didn't attach it as a separate file. So make sure you're doing the same thing here. You're not attaching it as a separate file. All right, so again, when you're ready to post it, you'll go ahead and click the reply button, and then you'll copy and paste your written response into the text field here. Don't just start composing it immediately in here. Compose it in a Google Doc or Microsoft Word document so you have it saved, so that you can revise it, so you can edit it so that it looks good, that's ready to share with people. And then when you're ready to post it, you go ahead and copy and paste it in here, and then you'll go ahead and click on the photo icon, the images icon in the toolbar to embed your photo, upload image, and then you'll go ahead and either click on the rocket ship to access your hard drive so you can get that picture, or you can click and drag the photo file into and drop it onto the rocket ship, and then you press the submit button, and then it will embed it into your post, and that way none of us needs to download the separate file attachment to actually look at the photo. All right, so let me go ahead and show you all an example. So we're going to go back out to the week 2 module. And then I have right here underneath the prompt for Major Essay Project 1, I have this, it says Object Text Connection Example. So let's go ahead and look at this. So I completed this activity using the reading that we read from week 1 on learning from failure. But again, you are all choosing one of the readings from this week, either on Finding Your Feet or on Unlearning, whichever stands out to you is more interesting. So you're going to choose one of those readings after reading both of them. But again, I used On Learning from Failure as my example. So let me go ahead and read through this, and I'll explain what this all means. And I want you all to try to mimic this as best as you can, so that we're practicing this. This will help us for the skills for all of our major essay projects. Okay, in On Unlearning, Richard E. Miller and Ann Jurecic explain the important role that mistakes, setbacks, and failures play in the learning process. Their major contention is that creativity and growth depend on how one views failure, and that the fear of failure stifles creativity and innovation. Referencing Ken Bain and his book, What the Best College Students Do, Miller and Jurecic go on to explain that what sets the best college students apart from the rest is their willingness to acknowledge failures, to explore them, and to learn from them. Unlike less creative people, they don't deny their mistakes or get defensive about errors. This is a key characteristic of a growth mindset. When a learner takes risks and analyzes their mistakes, they are more likely to make important discoveries and to push and grow their abilities. On the other hand, if someone does not take risks because they are afraid of making mistakes, they are hindering their ability to make these discoveries, connections, and steps forward in their learning. This idea reminds me of a gift my brother gave me a few years ago, a candle-powered oil diffuser with the phrase, "Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn," inscribed on its face. The implication of this statement is that losing at something can be a more valuable learning opportunity than winning at something can be. This is the essence of a growth mindset, something I strive to cultivate and promote in my own life as well as in my teaching. This inscription also demonstrates the importance of one's attitude in the learning process. The inscription doesn't say, "Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose." It reframes the loss or failure as a learning opportunity. Sometimes you learn, which is also at the essence of the growth mindset. This object sits in my home as a constant reminder to cultivate a growth mindset in my daily routine. So here's an image of the object. So you can see it's like this little wooden box thingy. And what you do, it's a candle-powered oil diffuser. So there's this little ceramic dish up top. So you put water in there, and then you put some drops of essential oil like eucalyptus or lavender or whatever the oil is. And then you put a little tea candle or tea light underneath it. And so the candle flame warms up the water with the oil in it. And then as it warms up, it kind of creates this lovely aroma with the essential oils. But the thing that the object that, or the characteristic of the object that I found a good connection with for the reading for that particular passage up above is what it says on the front. It says, "Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn." Now, this isn't just some random object that I picked. I just wasn't like, "Oh, that looks cool, just pick that." No, this is something that I was reminded of as I was reading the passage, right? And it has meaning because my brother gave it to me. So it has sentimental value. And so right there, this is an important object to me that connects to an important idea from On Learning from Failure. So right there, I've developed this important connection for me with this reading, because now I can relate to it. I can relate it to this specific meaningful object that my brother gave me to the idea of learning from failure. And so now the reading itself has more meaning for me. And so this is a very great demonstration of what Miller and Jurecic mean on Finding Your Feet on pages 1-7. So some of you have probably already read that, or you're about to read it. But they say nothing is inherently interesting, but everything has the potential to be made interesting. So this is putting that right into practice. Nothing's automatically interesting. You have to work to make something interesting to yourself. So I made this reading interesting to myself because I connected it to this object that I have that has meaning to me. So let me go ahead and just break down this, the actual writing of this. So I chose to compose this in 2 paragraphs. So the first paragraph is all about the passage from the reading. So I provide I introduce the reading, for example. So I say, in On Learning from Failure, Richard E. Miller and Ann Jurecic explain, blah, 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 blah. I have a little brief kind of summary of the reading. But I want you all to practice this in your own response. So actually compose your first sentence in this way. So you would say in, and then either on Finding Your Feet or on Unlearning. So whichever reading you chose. Richard E. Miller and Andrew Essick explain. And then you would go ahead and provide a little kind of brief summary of that reading. And then you can go ahead and introduce the key passage that stood out to you. So the passage that I chose was this quotation here. Now keep in mind, I introduced the quotation with the signal phrases. I have another quotation up here. I introduced it with the signal phrase. So you want to make sure that you are doing the same thing. I also included the page number after it. So we want to practice that. So you can kind of use this as a template or use this as a good example. And then I didn't just go on after introducing the passage. I didn't just go on to talk right about my object. I broke the passage down. So I explained what I think the passage means. Okay, so make sure you explain what the passage means before going on to talking about the object you connected it to. So then in a second paragraph, then you can go ahead and talk about the object and explain why and how it connects to the passage that you chose. And then you would go ahead and embed the photo just like I did here so that we don't need to download the image to our hard drive to look at it. All right, y'all. Well, if you have any questions, please let me know. Send me a message. I'm happy to respond, address any questions that you might have. Don't be shy. Reach out to me. Let me know. I'm here. And I really look forward to reading these responses. I'm looking forward to that. All right, y'all. Take care.